When the parcel arrived at dawn, wrapped in coarse brown paper and sealed with a smear of turmeric, the envelope inside made no sense to anyone who knew Arjun Rana. Two lines of verse scrawled in a hand he recognized, and a single pressed jasmine petal folded as if in apology. At first glance, it looked like a trivial fan offering, but when Arjun unfolded the paper, a single sentence stabbed him deeper than any critic ever had. The words accused him of betrayal in the language of home. What seemed like a romantic memento would open a door into secrets that toppled reputations and rewrote the life of one of the most daring poets of his generation. Arjun was a Mumbai-born poet who wrote in English and Marathi in the late 20th century. He moved between smoky literary salons and government offices with equal ease. This is the story of how a private challenge turned public, how verse and scandal collided, and why one small petal became the spark for a ruin and a redemption. If you like stories that stitch passion to consequence, stay with us until the end. Today, we will trace Arjun's steps from the house where he learned to listen to a city that would not forgive. Arjun's childhood house smelled of wet earth and frying oil. He grew up in Dadar in a cramped flat above his maternal uncle's tailoring shop. The walls had faded posters of film stars and a scratched wooden table where his mother, Savita, threaded needles late into the night. There was always the taste of jaggery and tea on his lips, soot on his fingertips from kerosene lamps, and a lullaby of trains distant like a metronome. His father, Ramakant, worked the docks and returned with the smell of fish and diesel, stern hands and pockets empty of praise. Arjun learnt early that words could soften a hungry room. His mother taught him to fold a letter like she folded clothes, with care and a secret fold at the corner. He carried his mother's small rituals into a life on stages, and he kept the scar from a childhood fall behind his left ear as a private map. Those physical memories shaped his voice more than any university professor ever could. At college, Arjun found books and first loves that happened in crowded canteens and musty libraries. He met Priya Menon in a seminar on modernism. She laughed like someone who believed every line could be revised into truth. Ramesh Iron, a lanky critic with spectacles forever slipping, called Arjun's early work reckless and promising in the same breath. Leela Shah, who later became a theatre director, introduced him to recitations staged under sodium lamps. Dialogue in those days was urgent. In the library one afternoon, Priya said, "You write as if you are hiding something." Arjun replied, "Maybe I am hiding everything." Priya touched the edge of his notebook and smiled. Then, "Let me help you open it," Ramesh interjected. "Hiding's a habit for the brave." Leela leaned back and whispered, "Or for the frightened who think silence is safer." Those exchanges left fingerprints on his poems. The smell of old paper, the chalk dust in classrooms, and the metallic clang of tin teacups became textures in his lines. His first scandal at 23 involved a poem that named a living politician in thinly veiled metaphor. Newspaper columns praised the audacity and want of consequences. The taste of bitter coffee at dawn after reading those reviews became a ritual of reckoning. Success arrived as quick as a monsoon. Night after night, Arjun read to packed halls. Inspectors and professors, students and taxi drivers, Sushmita from the university press, and Inspector Rao, who had once written letters about poetry, all crowded into rooms where his voice cut through cigarette smoke. A publishing house in Pune printed his second volume, and the book became a talking point in salons and in the morning papers. Kamal Desai, editor at a leading magazine, called him an incendiary voice. Vishal Mehra, a television host, invited him for a late-night debate that turned into a rating storm. Off stage, the applause fed an appetite that was hard to curb. Parties smelled of cologne and stale cake. He drank to loosen lines and to bind himself to admirers. A photograph of him with politician Nalin Patwardhan on a rooftop circulated, and the image became currency in gossip columns. Yet there were warning signs. Ananya Seth, his agent, warned, "You are speaking to the right rooms and the wrong ears." Arjun replied with a shrug that looked like confidence. "Let them listen," he said. "If they are offended, that is proof I have struck something true." The desire to be heard tangled with pride and started to color choices. He began accepting invitations that put him close to power and closer still to temptation. Then the scandal. A letter published in a scandal sheet accused Arjun of plagiarizing a folk song and of exploiting a woman poet from a village near Pune. The allegation spread like mustard oil spilled on a hot pan. Leela confronted him in a rehearsal room where the light was thin and the paint smelled strong. "Did you use her words?" she demanded. Arjun answered, "I adapted an old line." Leela hissed, "Adapted into stealing is a small step." Priya stood by the doorway, her voice low. "You know her? You sent copies to the press?" Arjun paused and said, "I thought I was rescuing a line." Ramesh added, "Rescue without consent is another name for theft." The exchange escalated into public hearings where journalists like Kamal and television anchors like Vishal dissected intent and ownership. Inspector Rao received petitions. Ananya negotiated calm while papers printed every sentence with a taste for outrage. The village poet's name, Sunita Naik, was spoken in families over dinner. Each named reaction pushed Arjun further from those who once defended him and closer to an audience hungry for spectacle. At this point, the comment call to action becomes relevant. If this story has pulled a chord in you, tell us in the comments what you think caused the break. Was it a calculated sabotage, a hunger for fame, an accident, or something else? Start your reply with 1. Sabotage, 2. Friendship betrayed, 3. Accident, or 4. Another explanation, and add 2 lines why. We will read the most thoughtful answers and explore the best theories in a follow-up. Your perspective helps us reassemble events with more eyes on the truth. Now back to the narrative. Tension pulled taut twice in ways that changed the course. The first time was when a sealed envelope arrived at Arjun's publisher with a tape recording that contained a voice very like his admitting to altering Sunita's melody. The recording played on the radio and cut off laughter at dinner tables. People felt betrayed. The second tense moment came when Arjun stood at the pier at night with rain on his face and a decision to leave the city or to name the names behind the smear. He stayed and chose confession. Both moments were tight with sensory detail. The crackle of the radio, the cold salt air, the paper's weight like a small death. These were hours that felt like held breaths and left marks. In courtrooms and in public letters, Arjun fought with words and with evidence. He wrote long apologies and shorter denials. There were dialogues that became almost theatrical. On the day he traveled to the village, he met Sunita face to face. Sunita looked small and durable, her sari smelling of river mud. She said, "You took my line like a bird takes a seed." Arjun replied, "I thought I was feeding it." Sunita answered, "Feeding and taking are not the same." Ananya stood behind him and murmured, "We must document everything." Ramesh, who accompanied them, noted, "The city will not hear nuance." Kamal photographed them silently. That conversation did not resolve every pain, but it shifted the arc. Arjun decided on exile, not to escape, but to learn and to repair. He took a train to a coastal town where the wind tasted of brine and the sky opened with a clarity that made his grief visible. In exile, Arjun taught in a small school, to children who had never owned a proper notebook. He learned carpentry from a man called Bapu who smelled of sawdust and drying glue. He worked in relief camps during a storm, hauling sandbags until his fingers burned, and the soap he used smelled like lemon. He read local songs into notebooks with consent and slowly translated them with Sunita's blessing. His work became service rather than spectacle. When cholera came one dark rainy night, he organized a makeshift clinic, and the effort cost him his lungs. He kept writing to Priya and to Sunita. Savita, in letters stained with coconut oil. In the final days, his voice in hospital was thin. Inspector Rao visited with a quiet look of respect. Priya read his last poem aloud, saying, "You returned what you borrowed, and you taught us to listen." The manner of his death was not glamorous. He died in a bed under a mosquito net with the smell of antiseptic and cardamom tea and a soft hush of waves in the distance. Arjun's legacy was complicated. After his death, universities archived his manuscripts, but also deposited the recordings in a special collection labeled Contested Works. Sunita's songs gained protection, and a trust named after her ensured royalties for rural singers. Leela staged a play called The Borrowed Line that toured colleges. Priya became an editor who mentored village writers. Ramesh wrote a revised essay on authorship. Ananya set up a fellowship for cultural restitution. Kamal's photographs hung in a gallery with labels that told both triumph and error. Years later, a grandson of Ramakant donated Arjun's childhood table to a museum that smelled still faintly of oil and jasmine. The city that had once denounced him printed essays that argued that scandal had forced a reckoning with consent in art. The memory of the jasmine petal became a symbol of apology and at the same time of the fragility of ownership. The question we asked at the beginning returns and changes shape. Was he a thief, a savior, or something in between? The answer is not tidy. At the end, what remains is a story about listening and taking, and about how the public will often decide faster than it understands. Arjun's life taught that daring to challenge conventions can lead to praise and to ruin, both in equal measure. Documents and letters kept in different archives confirm dates and donations and the existence of recorded apologies. If this story moved you, subscribe and click the bell for more investigations where reputation, truth, and the messy human stories behind them meet. We will bring documents, interviews, and debates that let you judge for yourselves. Remember that some lines are borrowed and some are returned. But the act of listening carefully may be the most radical thing any of us can do.